Hello everyone. Today we will explore the evolution of thoughts and ideas in ancient India, focusing on chapter 6 of our past one titled New Questions and Ideas. We will also link it to our previous chapter on early societies and their cultural developments. This connection is vital for understanding the broader socio-political context relevant for your UPSC and UPPSC preparation. In the previous chapter, we examined early societies in India, focusing on the Indus Valley civilization and subsequent agriculture communities. We discussed how these societies laid the groundwork for social structures, economic practices, and early religious beliefs. As these early communities evolved, they began to grapple with profound questions about existence, morality, and the universe, leading to the emergence of new philosophical movements that significantly shaped Indian culture. This transition sets the stage for our exploration of Buddhism and Jainism in this chapter. Mahajanpada period was the time when many great thinkers and philosophers emerged, all writing and debating their ideas. People liked to listen to them. These scholars were also teachers or gurus and had schools called ashrams or gurukuls, where they taught students. Towns even had special assembly halls for debates called Kautuhal Shala, which were halls for arousing curiosity. Among the first thinkers were the rishis or sages who wrote the Upanishads. These thinkers were seeking answer to many questions about life, like why should society be divided into caste? What makes the Brahmin superior to everyone else? Why do we need expensive religious rituals? Isn't an animal sacrifice immoral because it is taking a life? If God is for everyone, shouldn't we be able to pray Him directly without needing priests to make Him listen to our prayers? So you can be sure there were lots of angry debates at Kautuhal Shala. It was a very intellectually stimulating time for the people of India. Most interestingly, it saw the rise of various philosophical schools, particularly Buddhism and Jainism, which challenged the existing Vedic tradition and rituals. What is interesting is that many of them were non Brahmins, especially Kshatriya, and they were quite critical of the way Brahmin refused to share their knowledge about the Vedas and made people perform expensive religious rituals. Incidentally, both the Buddha and Mahavira were also Kshatriya. Let's learn the inspiring story of Buddha, who became known as Buddha, meaning the awakened one. Siddharth Gautam was born around 563 BCE in Lumbini, which is in present day Nepal. He was the son of King Suddhodana, a chieftain of the Sakya clan of Kapilvastu and Queen Maya. The Buddhist chronicles say that when Siddhartha was born, a sage predicted that he would become a wandering monk. Siddhartha was raised in a life of luxury, shielded from the harsh realities of life. His father wanted him to be a powerful king. At the age of 29, Siddhartha ventured outside the palace. This trip changed his life forever. He encountered four significant sights. First one is an old man representing aging. Now the second one is a sick person representing illness. Third is a dead body representing death. Fourth is a wandering monk representing renunciation and the search for truth. Deeply affected by what he had seen, Siddharth decided to renounce his royal life. He left his palace and family, seeking answers to the fundamental questions of life and suffering. Siddharth met many teachers, but none of their answers pleased him. Then he started meditating under a peepal tree at Uruvela, which is now known as Bodh Gaya. After 49 days, he attained enlightenment, becoming the Buddha or the awakened one. He discovered the nature of suffering and the path to liberation. Buddha gave his first sermon in Sarnath near Varanasi. This event is known as the turning of the wheel of Dharma. In this sermon, he shared the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path, which with his first 5 disciples, marking the beginning of his teachings after attaining enlightenment. Sarnath remains an important pilgrimage site for Buddhists today. Buddha articulated his insight through the Four Noble Truths, which is first is dukkha, meaning the world is full of suffering. Second is tanha, meaning the main cause of suffering is desire. Third is nirvana, meaning to end suffering we have to end our desire. Fourth is Eightfold Path, meaning to end our desire we have to follow Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path includes right understanding, intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. After attaining enlightenment, Buddha spent the next 45 years teaching across northern India. His teaching emphasized compassion, non-violence, and ethical living. He established a Sangha and encouraged followers from all walks of life. Buddha died in Kushinagar, which is located in present-day Uttar Pradesh. His death, known as Parinirvana, occurred around 483 BCE. Here a beautiful story is written about the Buddha, the story of Kissa Gautami. Now this story emphasizes the importance of recognizing the impermanence of life and the universal nature of suffering. It teaches us about acceptance and the path to spiritual growth through understanding. After reading the story, you have to answer this question. What was the Buddha trying to teach the sorrowing mother? According to me, he was trying to tell her that life is temporary and the death is a natural part of existence. Accepting her son's death is essential for healing. Sorrow can be transferred into wisdom and spiritual growth. Acknowledging the impermanence of life helps overcome grief and achieve peace. Next section is Nishad. But before moving on to Nishad, let's see what are the 6 schools of Indian philosophy. The 6 classical school of Indian philosophy known as Shat Darshan of each offer unique perspective on reality, knowledge and liberation. Like Nyaya, it focuses on logic and epistemology, emphasizing valid means of knowledge. Now Vaisheshika believes the universe is composed of indivisible atoms and explains the world through interactions. Now another one is Samakhya, a dualistic philosophy that poses 2 primary principles, Purusha and Prakriti. Now next is Yoga. It is a practical system for spiritual discipline, emphasizing meditation and mental control to achieve liberation and oneness with the true self. And another one is Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa. It focuses on interpreting Vedic text and rituals, emphasizing the importance of dharma and karma for spiritual progress. Another one is Vedanta. Now Vedanta centers on the nature of ultimate reality and the self. And one is Purva Mimamsa, another is Uttara Mimamsa. Now these 6 systems of philosophy are said to have been founded by these sages: Gautama, Konada, Kapila, Patanjali, Jaimini and Vyasa. Now each school offers distinct method and teachings aimed at understanding the nature of existence, knowledge and the path to spiritual freedom. Now moving on to the Upanishad. Upanishads are ancient Indian texts that are part of the Vedas, focusing on philosophy and spirituality, composed between 800 BCE and 400 BCE. They mark a shift from rituals to philosophical inquiry. The word Upanishad means to sit near. It meant to sit before a guru to gain knowledge. There are 11 main books of Upanishad, some of which are Katha, Mundaka, Kena Upanishad. You must have heard about the phrase Satyamev Jayate. It is taken from Mundaka Upanishad. Many Upanishadic thinkers were Brahmins. as the Brahmin class were traditionally associated with religious and philosophical scholarship in ancient India. However, it is important to note that not all thinkers from this period were from Brahmin families. Satyakama was the son of a Jabala, a woman of humble origins. His lineage was not from a traditional Brahmin family, which is noteworthy in the context of his quest for spiritual knowledge. Now, here one story is written. Please read this story and try to answer the question. We will explore the significant contribution of women thinkers in the Upanishad. While many texts primarily feature male philosophers, women like Gargi, Maitreyi, and Vachakanavi played crucial role in shaping spiritual and philosophical discourse. Gargi Vachakanavi was a prominent philosopher known for her debates on the nature of the universe and self. Maitreyi is also featured in the Upanishad. She questions her husband Yajnavalakya about immorality and the self, showcasing her philosophical inquiry. Vachakanavi is recognized as a wise woman with significant contribution to philosophical discussions. Here, I want to highlight the importance of reading the stories given in the boxes, like in this. Remember, reading these stories is not just about passing the test. It is about gaining knowledge and becoming more curious learners. The more you engage with the material, the easier it becomes to connect the dots and understand the bigger picture. Now let's learn the story of a famous grammarian, Panini. Panini was a famous grammarian who lived around the 5th to 4th century BCE in ancient India. He is best known for his work on Sanskrit grammar. His most important work is the Ashtadhyayi, which means 8 chapters. This text contains about 4,000 rule sutras that explain how Sanskrit works, covering its grammar and syntax. Panini is regarded as one of the greatest grammarian ever. His contribution have enriched our understanding of language, making him a key figure in both Indian and global linguistics. Let's dive deep into Jainism and learn about important figures and teachings of Jainism. The term Jaina is derived from the Sanskrit word Jina, which means conqueror or victor. In the context of Jainism, it refers to those who have conquered their passion and desires, achieving spiritual liberation. Vardhaman Mahavira, often refers to simply as Mahavira. Mahavir is one of the most significant figures in Jainism. Mahavir was born around 599 BCE in Kundagrama near modern-day Bihar. He was 24th Tirthankara of the Jainas. Now he was born around 599 BCE in the Kundagrama to King Siddharth and Queen Trishala, who was a Lichavi princess. His birth name was Vardhaman, meaning one who grows. At the age of 30, following the death of his parents and after a period of reflection, Mahavir renounced his worldly possessions and embarked on a spiritual quest. After wandering for 12 years, he gained enlightenment and preached for the rest of his life. The Jainas believed that the Mahavir was last in the line of 24 teachers called Tirthankaras. Tirthankaras are spiritual teachers who have attained liberation and guide others on the path to enlightenment. Mahavir is the most prominent Tirthankara and his teaching formed the foundation of Jain philosophy. Rishabh, also known as Adinath, is considered the first Tirthankara who laid the groundwork for Jain teachings. Mahavir and early Jain teachers primarily preached in Prakrit, which was spoken by common people. Prakrit was more accessible to the common people than Sanskrit, which was predominantly used in religious and scholarly texts. Mahavir was against the rituals and preached a simple way of life that followed the philosophy of the three jewels or three ratnas, which are: first is Samyak Darshan, meaning right faith. It means having a correct understanding and belief in Jain teachings. Second is Samyak Gyan, meaning right knowledge. It means gaining clear and accurate knowledge of Jain philosophy and the nature of reality. Third is Samyak Charitra, meaning right conduct. It means following ethical behaviors and adhering to the 5 great vows, which are non-violence, truth, non-stealing, celibacy, non-possessiveness. Later, the Jains came to be divided into 2 main sects: the Shvetambars, whose monks wear white, and the Digambars, or the sky-clad, whose monks don't wear any clothes at all and follow very strict rule of Ahimsa. Jainism was mainly supported by merchants and traders rather than farmers. This is largely because the economic activities and values of Jainism aligned well with the commerce, which required trust and ethical dealings. While some farmers may have appreciated Jain principles, they were not a major source of support compared to the merchant class. Jainism flourished in urban areas where the socio-economic structure favored trade over agriculture. Now, let's look at the question which is mentioned here. Why do you think the term Jinnah was used for Mahavira? As we have learned earlier, Mahavir is regarded as a Jinnah, meaning he conquered his desired and attachment, achieving spiritual liberation, that is moksha. This concept of conquest is fundamental to Jain philosophy. While Jainism existed before him, Mahavir played a crucial role in systemizing its teaching and practices, leading to the establishment of a more organized religious community. Thus, his followers began to identify themselves as Jains, reflecting their adherence to the teaching. Now we will explore the concept of Sangh. Its significance, its structure with a focus on key aspects relevant for the UPSC and UPPSC syllabus. The Sangh was established during the Buddha and Mahavir lifetime as they gathered followers and laid down rules for monastic life. First, we will get familiar with the Buddhist Sangha. The Buddhist Sangh is a vital community that includes ordained monks, nuns, and lay practitioners. Monks are ordained male practitioners who have dedicated their lives to studying and practicing the Buddha's teachings. They typically live in monasteries and follow strict ethical guidelines. Nuns or bhikshunis are ordained female practitioners. Female bhikshunis. They are ordained female practitioners who also adhere to the Buddhist path. The establishment of Bhikshuni Sangha was an important step in expanding the role of women in Buddhism. Lay practitioners also supported the Sangha through donation or actively participating in the Buddhist teaching. In Jainism, the Sangha refers to the community of monks, that is sadhus, nuns, sadhvis, and lay followers, shravakas and sravikas, who adhere to Jain teachings and practices. In Jainism, the Sangha is an important institution that includes monks, nuns, and lay practitioners. It plays a vital role in teaching, preserving, and practicing Jain philosophy, much like the Buddhist Sangha, but with its own distinct practices and teachings. Another interesting question is given here, which is list at least 2 ways in which the Sangha described in this lesson was different from the one mentioned in chapter 5. Were there any similarities? Now, previous chapter was about kingdom, kings, and early republic. Now, Sangha in Buddhism and Jainism refers to the community of ordained monks, bhikshus and bhikshunis and lay followers, while in the Vedic period, Janpada and Mahajanpada refer to gathering or assemblies, often related to rituals or community functions. Sangha in Buddhism and Jainism provides spiritual guidance, preserves teaching, and fosters community support. It emphasizes the collective practices and community ethics. While Sangha in Vedic and later Vedic primarily focuses on rituals, sacrifices, and preserving Vedic knowledge through oral tradition, it lacked a formalized monastic order. Now let's explore the significance of monasteries in Buddhism and Jainism in ancient India. Buddhist monasteries, known as viharas, served as residential quarters for monks and nuns. They were places for meditation, teaching, and living. Jain monasteries, known as mats or bhikshugars, were residential communities for monks and nuns, focused on ascetic practice, spiritual study, and community living. Here, a picture of cave is shown. It is a Karle cave, which is in Maharashtra. The Karle caves are part of a larger tradition of rock cut architecture in India, influencing the development of similar sites such as Ajanta and Ellora caves. Now, viharas typically feature simple structure, including meditation halls and living quarters. Some monasteries also housed stupas that contained sacred relics. Jain monasteries were often featured simple designs reflecting Jain values of minimalism and non-attachment. They included meditation halls and living spaces. One important point to keep in mind is that some early viharas were constructed from wood, especially before the advent of rock cut architecture. Now, in the early days of Buddhism and Jainism, many monastic communities utilized available materials, including wood, to construct viharas. These wooden structures provided shelter and communal spaces for monks. However, as the tradition evolved, the preference shifted to more enduring stone construction, which have left a lasting legacy in the form of rock cut viharas and cave complexes. The establishment of viharas and mutts was often a collaborative effort involving royal patronage, contribution from wealthy individuals, and support from local communities, all of which reflected the interconnectedness of religious, social, and economic factor in ancient India. King and local rulers were often supported the establishment of vihars as part of their patronage of Buddhism. They would donate land and resources to promote the religion and gain merit. As Buddhism gained prominence, Maurya Empire under Emperor Ashok actively promoted the establishment of vihars, providing land and resources for their construction. Let's explore an essential aspect of ancient Indian philosophy, the system of ashrams. This concept not only reflects the spiritual journey of an individual, but also the societal structure that guided the lives of people in ancient India. The concept of ashram is rooted in ancient Hindu texts, particularly the Vedas, and later elaborated in the Dharma Shastra, such as Manusmriti. These texts outline the four stages of brahmacharya, stages of life, that is, brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasa, along with the associated duties and responsibilities. Let us see what was happening elsewhere in the world. The contemporary of Mahavir and Buddha in Iran was Zarathustra, also known as Zoroaster, was the founder of Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religion. Mahavir, Buddha, and Zarathustra lived around the same time. These figures played significant role in shaping the spiritual and philosophical landscape of their respective regions, India and Persia. Now let's move on to the imagine section. You want to go to listen to one of the preachers who lived about 2500 years ago. Describe your conversation with your parents as you try to persuade them to let you go. Now you can write this response in your own words. I have prepared something, but since it is not a monologue, it is challenging for me to express both perspective. You can incorporate a friend in the dialogue. Moving on to the next section, which is let's recall. First question is describing the way in which the Buddha tried to spread his message to the people. Now Buddha led by example. After attaining enlightenment, his calm demeanor, ethical lifestyle, and wisdom attracted people to his teachings. His own life demonstrated the possibility of overcoming suffering, that is, dukh. Buddha traveled extensively across India, delivering sermons to diverse audiences from kings to commoners. His main message was that suffering can be overcome by following the Noble Eightfold Path, which involves right understanding, right conduct, and right mental discipline. Now, Buddha established the Sangha, a community of monks, nuns, and lay followers. The Sangha became essential for preserving and spreading his teachings. Kings like Bimbisar and later Ashoka played a crucial role in promoting Buddhism. Ashoka, after converting to Buddhism, sent missionaries across Asia, helping spread the message beyond India. In short, Buddha spread his message through personal example, clear teachings, and by forming a supportive community. His open, inclusive approach, supported by royal patronage and missionary activity, helped his teaching reach diverse regions and people. Now, next question is whether the given statement is true or false. First is the Buddha encouraged animal sacrifice. No, Buddha did not encourage animal sacrifice. In fact, he actively opposed the practice of animal sacrifice, which was common in Vedic ritual of his time. So the given statement is false. Next is Sarnath is important because it was the place where the Buddha taught for the first time. Yes, Sarnath is indeed the place where Buddha delivered his first sermon after attaining enlightenment. This event is a key moment in Buddhist history and is widely accepted in Buddhist tradition. Next one is the Buddha taught that karma has no effect on our lives. No, Buddha did not teach that karma has no effect on our lives. In fact, karma, the law of cause and effect, is a central concept in Buddhist philosophy. According to Buddha teaching, karma plays a significant role in shaping our experience and lives, but it is understood in a specific way. Next is the Buddha attained enlightenment at Bodh Gaya. Yes, Buddha attained enlightenment in Bodh Gaya. Bodh Gaya is universally recognized as the place where Siddhartha Gautam, the Buddha, meditated and achieved enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. This is a pivotal event in the life of Buddha and the foundation of Buddhism itself. Now the next is Upanishadic thinkers believe that the Atma and Brahma were ultimately one. It is true that Upanishadic thinkers believe that the Atma and Brahma were ultimately one. This idea is central to the philosophy of Upanishad, which are a collection of ancient Indian texts that explore the nature of self, meaning Atma and the ultimate reality, which is Brahma. Now the next question is, what were the questions that Upanishadic thinkers wanted to answer? The Upanishads are primarily concerned with understanding the nature of existence, the Atma, the ultimate reality Brahma, and the path to spiritual liberation. The central theme of the Upanishad revolved around a set of fundamental philosophical questions, which were explored by the thinkers of this tradition. Key questions the Upanishadic thinkers sought to answers are: what is Brahma? Is it formless or does it have form? How does it relate to the material world? What is Atma? Is it eternal or unchanging, or does it change like the body? How are Atma and Brahma related? Are they separate or are they ultimately the same? Next question is, what were the main teachings of Mahavir? What were the main teachings of Mahavir? The teachings of Mahavir form the basis of Jainism and focus on non-violence, that is ahimsa, truth, that is satya, non-attachment, aparigraha, and spiritual liberation, moksha. His philosophy emphasizes living an ethical life, controlling desires, and purifying the soul from the bondage of karma. Jainism, through Mahavir's teaching, offer a path of personal and spiritual growth, where the goal is to attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death. These teachings are relevant not only in the context of Jainism, but also offer valuable insight into ethical living, environmental consciousness, and the respect for all forms of life, concepts that are increasingly recognized globally. Let's move on to the next section. I highly encourage you to take the initiative and engage with this section on your own. This exercise will not only enhance your understanding of the topic, but it will also help you develop critical skill like effective communication, critical thinking, and articulating your ideas with confidence. You can also invite a friend to join in the discussion, as it will provide a healthy exchange of perspective and improve your ability to express your thoughts clearly and respectfully. These essential skills will not only benefit you during your UPSC preparation, but also in your future professional life. In the next video, we will explore the fascinating story of Emperor Ashok, the emperor who gave up war. Thank you.